So, well, one of the first questions that we had sent to you was when we asked students what it meant to empower their voice, almost everyone said it meant to perform confidently and to have their performance be valued by their audience.
Mm.
How does one acquire confidence?
Ah, it's the magic question, isn't it? When I work with clients and I say, what would you like? Well, I just want to be more confident, as if it were
Mhm.
some pill we could take or magic formula. And really, hmm, gosh, we could go deep. How much time do we have? If I have to
Right.
sum this up in a nutshell, in my estimation, confidence is tricky because oftentimes, depending on culture, society, family, gender, etc., we may have been taught that it's not okay to be confident, or that confidence is the same as arrogance or being full of oneself. So, although we all say we want to be confident, especially as performers, many times we have a lot of baggage around that I think we need to examine before we can really take a critical look at what is holding us back from confidence. Um, I think that a lot of singers on the younger side believe, and I'm not saying that older singers can't believe the same thing, but I think a lot of times when you're in your sort of up and coming years, you believe that if you figure out your voice and sing with perfect technique, you will magically become confident.
Of course.
Right. And I'm here to tell you that is not the case, friends.
How it works.
Confidence has to be worked on from the inside out, and there's no amount of perfection in our voice that is going to magically gift us confidence. And as singers, we are our whole selves are our instrument, right? Is our instrument. It is not just here and how we show up on stage, but what of our humanity we bring to our performance, um, how we treat ourselves, how we treat others, what our values are, what we do outside of singing. So I really encourage people I work with to take a look at their lives as a whole and say, in which areas do I feel more confident and in which areas do I feel less confident? And then how do I begin working on that? A lot of times, the easiest way to begin working on our confidence, if we don't feel like we have enough of it, is to figure out what is the quality of my self talk. So we have our sort of capital S self, and then we have the chitter chatter that our brain creates all day long, which is frequently
Mhm.
anywhere between 20 to 40,000 thoughts per day, if you can imagine that. And
Wow.
I would probably venture, and I think most scientists would agree with me, that much of that mental chatter is on the negative side because we have an inborn negativity bias, which helps us survive in this big, scary world. So if we're always able to predict the next bad thing that could be lurking around the corner or 5 minutes from now, we will theoretically stay safe and alive longer, which is wonderful. We need that. But I always say we're not just about surviving, we really need to figure out how to thrive, right? So, what does it take for me to take a deeper look at my self-talk? And this can be hard because I often say to clients, feelings are not facts, and thoughts, most frequently, are not facts. Some thoughts are, of course, facts, but we have to be able to kind of take that proverbial step back between the true self, the sort of, watcher, observer self, and the part of the self that has so many opinions about who we are and who other people are, where we fit in the world, where our voice is lacking, et cetera, and watch out how we might be speaking to ourselves. So I think self-talk is one of the easiest inroads to confidence, but I would also say that zooming out and looking at confidence on a more global level, we as singers, we know that to make a career in this field takes a lot of sacrifice, a lot of dedication, and a really, really freaking tough skin. And we both have to be completely, I would say, permeable to criticism because in our education, that is almost quite literally what we are paying for. And in our voice lessons, especially I would say in our coachings, we are showing up and saying, all right, I can do that. Yes, teacher, that sounds correct. I will work on that. And we have developed this whole sort of culture, very hierarchical, traditional kind of culture in the classical world that the teacher is expert and we as the student are the apprentice or the learner. And I think there's real value in that. We are being handed down things through really an oral tradition in many ways, as much as a written tradition, or oral more so than written. And we have to be permeable to this criticism. And we can call it coaching, we can call it lots of different things, but many times we are kind of taking it as a criticism. And a teacher's job is just to really tell us what's going wrong and how to make it better, right? So we have to have that within us. We have to have a really, we have to have a lot of openness to learning. And we have to then also carry that critical voice within us so that when we're practicing on our own or when we graduate school and we're no longer under the weekly supervision of a teacher, perhaps, that we can internalize that teacher or that coach's voice and begin to teach ourselves and critique ourselves in order to become the best we can be. However, we also need to know when to put that to the side so that we can show up, for example, at an audition and say, here I am. Here's what I have to offer. This is literally the best I've got at this moment in time. And I've got to be okay with that being enough. And you, as the audition panel, you may not think it's enough or not the right fit for the job that you are wanting to fill. But I have to know when to turn down that self-critical voice and when to turn up the sort of inner cheerleader or hype person within us and say, I'm good enough to be here, and here's what I bring to the table. Here are my unique gifts. So we're constantly within that balance of, criticism versus confidence. I think that plays a big role in it too.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's great. It sounds like just like that really made me think about our next questions about music performance anxiety and the possible solutions for that. But basically what I'm hearing is it's not at all. It is about the technique, but it isn't about the technique. It's so much about what happens the other 99% of your life when you're,
Yeah.
for example, if you're only singing 30-minute lessons, maybe twice a week, what else is going on? How else are you taking in your own thoughts and talking to yourself, as well as the really interesting thing that you mentioned before is how does your culture influence maybe how you speak to yourself or how you behave in different settings? I
Mm-hmm.
think that's really interesting.
Yeah.
I think that segues really beautifully to music performance anxiety. I would love to hear what I we have some ideas about what it is. We've studied it and we've experienced it, but I would love to hear from you. What is it? What is music performance anxiety? Um, how can it manifest? And what can we do about it?
All in 5 minutes. I'm kidding.
Yes, of course.
Well, all of us performers at some point in time, I believe, will have an experience of performance anxiety. And can we really truly separate music performance anxiety from regular run-of-the-mill anxiety? Not especially. We might just say that one is situational, right? That we are experiencing the human experience of a strong emotion, really based in the kind of root or core emotion of fear. And we are experiencing it in a musical setting. So I wouldn't say that there is anything that particularly delineates music performance anxiety in terms of symptoms. It's more just anxiety, the human condition of anxiety appearing in a certain circumstance. However, it may manifest in more specific ways. For example, if we're going into a high stakes situation like an audition, for example. That's really the classic example. Most people struggle more in auditions than anywhere else because, generally speaking, for a performance, we have been able to work up to that, right? We've been in rehearsal for many weeks, if not months. We have sung it many times in front of people. We have acclimated to the situation. Now, we might experience nerves on opening night or higher nerves for performance nights, but we've had the ability to rehearse it many times in the same or very similar scenarios. Whereas with an audition, for example, we're walking into a room, we might not know what the building looks like, we might not know who's going to be sitting there. So all of this sort of strangeness or foreignness is going to set off the ancient alarm system within all of us. The alarm system is really just our limbic system, our lizard brain, our autonomic nervous system. And it's the part of us that, once again, helps keep us safe in this big, bad, scary world, right? That predicts possible negative outcomes, possible dangerous scenarios in order to keep us safe. Well, I always like to joke, this is really just fight, flight, or freeze playing out for us singers, but we do not get to fight the lion. We do not get to run from the lion. We certainly can't play dead in front of the lion. We have to walk on stage and sing in front of the lion, or stand next to the lion and sing, or in front of the lion and sing. So we have to have a really, really robust, steady nervous system. And if you're not born that way, some of us just have more sensitive alarm systems from the get-go, or they become more sensitive over time due to life experiences, trauma, etc. We have to learn tools in order to calm the nervous system so that we can do what we do. Unfortunately, but this is just good knowledge for everyone to have, we are small, as singers, we are small muscle athletes. We are using some of our bigger muscle groups, of course, when we're moving around the stage or for breathing, but a lot of the fine, small muscles that we are using here in the area of the larynx and the face, these are really tiny muscle groups, and they don't function as well when we're in fight or flight, because actually our large muscle groups are getting all of the body's attention because they're preparing us to, once again, fight or run, or worst case scenario, play dead. So this is why our voices tend to get shaky and why we tend to just get kind of really unstable as singers when we are very anxious. This part of the body in threat also closes down. Literally, the throat closes down in order to prevent foreign objects from coming in as a possible threat. Our breathing gets high and tense. Once again, everything in our body is preparing us to run or to fight, but that's not what we get to do in singing. We have to actually stand quite still oftentimes and coordinate all of these different systems in the body. So that's sort of I think, a basic definition of music performance anxiety. And there was another part to this question that I'll ask you to remind me of. Maybe one of the final parts of it.
You've talked about how it manifests in different ways.
Examples.
Yeah, and examples. And the third question was, let's see, how do we mitigate those negative effects? What are some
Oh,
strategies? And uh, coupling that, what I'm really interested in, since you work with people frequently on this, especially with a performance mindset, are there strategies that you've noticed are more effective than others? I'm sure it depends on the person, but are there some overarching strategies that you feel are more effective?
yeah, really, you're right in saying from person to person it can show up very differently. The physical symptoms, by and large, we will show up very similarly because we're all wired almost identically in our nervous system. Some of us may notice certain symptoms above others. Some people might really notice the pounding heart. Some people might really notice the shaky legs. Some people might really notice the sweaty palms. Other people might tune into other aspects of their being, namely, if not the physical symptoms, they might notice the racing thoughts that occur. The negative self-talk. Other people might really tune into the emotional experience. So I tend to look at it in these three directions, right? The physical, the emotional, and the cognitive or mental. And depending on who you are and what you are more accustomed to tuning into, that's where I usually like to start, because that's kind of your language, so to speak. However, with almost all of my clients, I start in the same place, which is with some calming breathing strategies. Now, we all have heard that we're supposed to, take deep breaths in order to calm ourselves, but your average person is going to take them very incorrectly, thereby oftentimes making it worse. So if you walk up to Joe Schmo on the street and you say, "Hey, Joe, take a deep breath," what does Joe do?
Mhm.
Well, if you do that 5 to 10 times in a row, I promise you're going to feel worse than you feel right now, because you are taking in way too much oxygen and you are not, your breathing ratio is all wrong. So if we want to start by grounding ourselves enough in the body to feel a little calmer in the body, which tends to slow down the emotional and the cognitive impact as well, we need to know how to stimulate two different nerves in the body, one being the vagus nerve, which is, I believe, the 10th cranial nerve, and it innervates the diaphragm, interestingly as well. So when we can do a breathing exercise in which the exhale is at least twice as long as the inhale, so once again, 1 part inhale to at least 2 parts exhale, we stimulate the vagus nerve, which sets off the calming response in the body. Now we want to do this, we can do this in different ways. We can do it with a counting breath, like some people like the 4-7-8 breath, which is 4 counts inhale, 7 counts hold, 8 counts exhale. You could also do a simple 4-8, 4 inhale, 8 exhale, or the one I like to teach, which is really basic. I call it the hissing breath. You can also blow it out, and you just take in a very easy inhale, and then you hiss or blow out like you're blowing through a teeny tiny coffee straw. And we create that hissing or the teeny tiny aperture in order to dam back the exhale enough to slow it down. And then when we do that, we really get to the end of our exhale, and then we just do it 5 to 10 times in a row. We stimulate the vagus nerve. Another great one that I use with people is called the physiologic sigh. I refer to it as the sobbing breath. This is one that stimulates a nerve called the phrenic nerve, spelled with a PH, that is also responsible for a calming response. And this one is, you can see detailed instructions of it online. Andrew Huberman has actually kind of made it more popular in recent years, where you do a big inhale and then you top it off a little bit, and then you do an exhale. So it's like this. Notice this one's very different. We're not taking a calm inhale. We're actually kind of taking a big sternum raising inhale. It's called the sobbing breath. Excuse me, computer just told me I need to plug it in. Because if you think about a child who's just had a temper tantrum, or us adults too, when we're finished crying, what do? We go. So we do a 2-part inhale. So this is the reason why we do this is to bring our system back into equilibrium. So that's what we're trying to do here too. I like the hissing breath for when we're at lower levels of anxiety, and the sobbing breath or the physiologic sigh tends to work better when we're at higher levels of anxiety. So I always like to point that out to people. If your anxiety is kind of on the 1 to 5 end of a 10-point scale, try the hissing breath. If you're at like a 5 to 10 point on the anxiety scale, try the sobbing breath. But if you're too calm and you try the sobbing breath, I guarantee you'll feel kind of yucky afterwards, because you're, once again, the ratios are off. So breathing is where I like to start off with a lot of people, because it's a quick in to the physiology and gets our nerves working with us instead of against us. Mindset, of course, does have a lot to do with it. I always like to caution people that mindset isn't everything. We tend to live in a very head focused, I believe we live in a very head focused society, and we sort of believe that we can think our way out of everything. And we can't always think our way out of everything. I mean, if we could, we would have solved music performance anxiety long ago. So sometimes we need to go to those strategies that help calm the body, of which breathing can be one of those strategies, or strategies to deal with our emotions, or strategies, honestly, to help us prepare differently, or to make us change habits surrounding practice. Many people avoid practice out of anxiety, right? Out of a type of music performance anxiety. They avoid practicing, they avoid showing up to things, they avoid auditioning, because they're so anxious, thereby creating a negative feedback cycle in which you don't have the opportunity to practice your art form more. So, there are some sort of practicalities with this too. As far as mindset goes, I think the quickest way to
Ingela,
describe this, yes.
may I ask you to repeat what you said about practicing?
Oh,
Unfortunately, the internet glitched and it
sure,
interrupted what you were saying. Sorry,
no problem.
it was only the bit about most people avoid practicing because they're anxious about it.
Yeah, so I like to kind of do a little bit of a tough love talk when I'm with people too and say, okay, we can work on all the strategies in the world, but honestly, how much are you practicing? And is your music performance anxiety causing you to avoid practicing? Is it causing you to avoid auditioning? Is it causing you to avoid signing up to sing in studio class? What are you avoiding out of anxiety? Avoidance or procrastination really are a form of anxiety, and oftentimes they're rooted in perfectionism. If I can't do this thing perfectly, then I don't want to do it at all. So we do have to be really realistic with ourselves. I can give you all the tricks in the world, but if you're not practicing enough, you're not going to feel good in your audition. You're not going to feel good singing in studio class. So we have to get really honest about that. And that's more about habit change and also addressing yeah, just some habits or beliefs we have around practicing, as well as addressing fixed versus growth mindset. One of the top books that I recommend to all my clients is the book Mindset by the author Dr. Carol Dweck, Dweck. It's a fantastic book. She talks a lot about the concept of talent and how when we're told we're talented, that actually doesn't do us many favors a lot of the time because the word talent just presumes that somehow I'm born this way and I didn't have to work hard to get here. So when somebody after I'm done performing says, "Oh, you're so talented," I understand that they mean it kindly, but I kind of bristle at that one because I'm like, you're acting as if I haven't had to work to do this. Or people say, "Oh, you were just born that way," or "It's your God-given talent." And sure, maybe we had some natural aptitude, all of us who decided to go into singing, but that's not a guarantee. Everybody has the same coordination and instrument, and we as singers know we can teach most people to sing. And if they really dedicated themselves, they could probably sing quite well. So looking at where we have a fixed mindset versus a growth mindset can be really important. And I do a lot of work with clients using cognitive behavioral strategies. So meaning thinking about how we think, thinking once again about how we speak to ourselves. And this is not a matter of positive affirmations. And I like to make that really clear. For your average person, a positive affirmation is not going to work because if I don't think I have great high notes, there's no amount of looking in the mirror and telling myself my high notes are the best in the world that is going to make me believe that. My brain is going to be like, that's BS. I don't believe a word you're saying. And we're stuck right back where we were. So what we want to do is be able to address negative thought patterns that we are engaging in, which once again can take some time and practice. Journaling helps, working with a professional helps. Being able to take a step back and notice when those negative thought patterns are coming up, being able to stop them in their tracks, and being able to replace them with something that is more supportive and helpful, but also has a dose of realism. Once again, no positive affirmations. They're not going to work for 95% of the population. But if I were able to say to myself, if I don't believe I have great high notes, or that's a struggle I've had, if I'm able to say to myself instead of my high notes suck, or my high notes are terrible, or I'll never get work with these awful high notes, if I'm able to say to myself something along the lines of, okay, although my high notes are a struggle, I believe with time and the right support, they can get better. Or although I still struggle with my high notes, I can look back a year ago from now and say I've really improved certain qualities of them. Or although my high notes are a struggle, everybody has an area of their voice that they find to be a challenge, and this is mine, and I will continue to work on it with dedication. So those are just some examples, but we have to literally practice those thoughts because those are not the thoughts that are going to come naturally. What our brain wants to naturally do, once again, is just lean into its negativity bias and go, you're crap, and everything's crap, and everything you do is crap. And we have to be able to stop that in its tracks and say, oh, hold up, that's not helping me, because those thoughts have an emotional impact on me. They also then have a behavioral impact on me, right? So if we kind of think of this as like a little cycle or a triangle, as it were, thoughts, emotions, and behaviors, all of these influence one another in both directions. But thoughts are really the area where we can kind of gain some access into the system. We can step in and say, I can revise and refine how I think about myself and how I talk to myself, thereby creating a gentler emotional impact or an overall better emotional impact. And then hopefully that bettered state will lead you to behaviors that are also more supportive, right? So a singer that says to themselves, for example, although I struggle with my high notes, I think that by practicing and working with my teacher, I can improve them. I believe that person is more likely to spend time in the practice room working through this than the person who tells themselves, this is a disaster and I'm terrible at it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. Though, thank you. Those are really wonderful instructions and thoughts and
Yeah.
definitions.
Welcome.
Um, you kind of touched on this at the beginning of this last question, but going forward, we're asking how does performance anxiety affect other non-musical areas of our lives? And, you were saying that most of the time it's a form of anxiety that will be present. So, pairing those ideas, how does it affect the non-musical areas?
Yeah, once again, of course, very case dependent, but I think if we were speaking in broad strokes, if you tend to have a lot of music performance anxiety, I think there's a pretty high likelihood that you're experiencing anxiety in other areas of your life. We can
Mhm.
also think of music performance anxiety as a type of social anxiety, even maybe going as far as calling it a type of social phobia, for example. So I'll also just state for a moment that music performance anxiety is not a diagnosable condition. It does not exist specifically within the DSM, which is the diagnostic manual that we use as mental health professionals to give people a mental health diagnosis. However, we might be able to put it under like a specific phobia or social anxiety or under some other diagnosable umbrella. I think this is once again is going to be kind of case dependent, but what it comes down to is as a singer, there's no way around this. We have to be liked. People
Yes.
have to want to listen to us and pay us money to do so. And whether that's on the level of the audience or the teachers who are, allowing you granting you access into the institution, or it's the organization that hires you, or it's the pianist who wants to do a concert with you. We do have to be likable in many ways. People have to want to look at us and listen to us and spend their valuable time, energy, and money doing so. This taps into some very deep fears within us. And a lot of people don't think about this or realize it, but really, a feeling of belonging or inclusion within our social spheres is of utmost importance to our literal survival. So, once again, just going back to kind of the ancient wiring of our nervous system and body, for eons, we have lived in small groups or tribes, and we have been very dependent upon everybody within that little structure for our care, our well being, and our survival. And had we been rejected from that group, it might have meant death for us. And our nervous system still knows that. So we fear rejection so greatly because rejection at one point in time, and still even today in many ways, can make us very vulnerable. One of the most impressive longitudinal studies that they've ever done on human health, I believe is called the Harvard Men's Study, and they followed a group of Harvard graduates, don't quote me on this, from like the 1930s or early 1940s. They followed many of them throughout their lifetime to assess all sorts of different factors in their lives to see what made people live healthy longer. And they found from this study that being isolated, being lonely, being not embedded within a social group is overall way worse for our health than if you are embedded within a social group and you smoke a pack of cigarettes a day,
Wow.
Wow.
right? So loneliness is
Yeah.
really kind of an epidemic in our culture, and a lot of people crave a sense of belonging. So anything that's going to feel kind of rejecting to that. So I believe that if you're a person who experiences some social anxiety in general, or if you're a person who's experienced a lot of loneliness or rejection, you may feel the stakes even higher in your performance life. So that's something to look at. Also, something to really look at is, how am I treating myself overall? Like, am I getting enough sleep? That's a biggie. That's one that I start with almost everybody I work with. How's your sleep? Because let me tell you, if you are not sleeping well, if you do not have good, what they call sleep hygiene, you will not be your best mentally and emotionally, let alone physically and, on stage and whatnot. But, right, sleep can really impact our health. What's your media diet? Like, how much time do you spend on media? And how much of that time is cutting into time where you could be doing things that would be better for your overall well-being? How much time do you spend exercising? What kind of nourishing foods do you put into your body? Like, moving our bodies is really imperative for our mental health. Like, forget about how it makes you look. Forget about the bikini body. Do it for your mental health. So just kind of looking at all these areas of our lives and saying, where am I not taking just good basic care of myself? And yeah, I do tend to think that if you have a lot of music performance anxiety, you're going to be a person who's finding anxiety pop up in other aspects of your life as well. Does that answer the question?
Oh, for
Yeah,
sure.
absolutely.
And you also touched on what our final question is.
Hmm.
A really, really big theme that we saw within our answers was community focused,
Mm,
and talking about voice world community in general. And so something that we drew from that was, how do we as performers create a community? And then also in that community, how can our voice be heard?
mm.
And I guess also follow up with, how can we feel valued?
Yeah, yeah. I suppose that's literally and figuratively, how can our voice be heard, right? Because we
Mhm.
want work, we want to be singing. But how do we also feel like we have a voice, a figurative voice within a community? Um, Going back to this idea that loneliness is an epidemic and that people by and large are feeling more and more disconnected than they ever have. What is your friend group like? Are you friends with people you sing with? Do you keep in touch with people? If we're looking at it from a career furthering, looking at it through a career furthering lens, which is also important, but also just for general connectedness, I believe it's really important for us singers to be friends with other singers, to sort of foster a sense of community instead of competition. But once again, this goes back to a lot of really ingrained survival instincts that if there's only this much pie and you get a piece of it, well, then that's less for me, right? So this very grabby me. If you get a role, then that means I'm bad and I don't like you anymore. You're taking things from me. Um, I wish that we could all look at music and performance as just kind of infinite in a way. Like, if there's not an opportunity, I can create an opportunity. Like, nobody can stop me from singing, truly, unless I stop myself. So, approaching what we do, and this is harder and harder in today's world with the state of the world and the economy and politics and the support or lack thereof of the arts in our culture and the closing down of many arts institutions, etc. There's a lot of fear, and things are not what they were 50, 60, 80 years ago. And they're not what they are in some foreign countries where the arts are better supported, although those are also few and far between. But if I can view, let's say, the students I sing with at school as my community and not my competition, I think I'm going to have more longevity in the arts overall and probably have higher levels of well-being. It takes a lot of self-work in order to do so, because we all know, and now y'all are master's students and therefore a little bit older and probably have a little bit more wisdom, but we can look at like how students are when they first enter a voice program, depending on the mood of the program and the kind of culture. But they can, enter and be like, oh my gosh, I got to grab anything I can get. And all these people are my competition and out of the way. And, there can be a lot of animosity, a lot of backstabbing, a lot of just not great behavior. And it's hard to avoid because people feel insecure. When they feel insecure, they start lashing out at others and being nasty behind their backs, etc. But if you think about it this way, we need other people. And what we do is very special and specialized and very unique. And I swear I could meet another classical singer anywhere in the world and we would automatically have a ton to talk about, right? I mean,
Yes.
even
Yeah.
between the three of us, we already have one degree of person in common, but I bet if we spoke longer, we would identify multiple people that we have in common. This is a
Hmm.
small community. And I believe we can choose the mindset that being a good colleague, being a good friend, staying connected within this community benefits me and benefits all of us. And I do believe that there's proof that when we get out of school and we are no longer embedded in such a strong community, I really encourage my clients who are sort of in the career launching phase to keep track of who is in their network and to stay connected with people, to support what they are doing. Because more likely than not, there will come the day where you will say, what opportunities exist out there? And if you are not connected to anybody out there, you will have no idea of where to start. But if you've maintained some good relationships from school or you're at least connected on social media, you can see what other people are doing. You can see what friends of friends are doing. Success leaves clues. You can see how people have been managing their careers, what steps they have been taking, what competitions they're singing in, what teachers they're studying with, etc. So I always encourage people, and a lot of them kind of blanch at this suggestion because it sounds sort of, I don't know, smarmy or something like that, like, oh, build your network, and it's not about going to people and saying, what can you give me? It's about staying connected to people and interested in what they're doing and then observing. And also, people want to help other people. So, a lot of opportunities that I have as a singer, they come from my network of personal connections. They don't, at my age in midlife, they don't necessarily come from auditions I'm doing, or I'm not singing in any competitions. I don't have an agent. I'm getting singing opportunities because somebody knows somebody who knows me. So
Hmm.
whether
Yeah.
it's staying connected to the singers keeping connections with the pianists and the instrumentalists you meet because you never know what they're going to be up to. I can't tell you how many jobs that I get or that people very close to me get as singers. They come from our network,
Yeah.
generally speaking.
Yeah.
There will be the few of us, the top, 1 to 5% who hit it big, get an agent, and people start negotiating things for them. But anymore, we all know those things are hard to come by. But that doesn't mean you have to stop singing. You just have to get clever about it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It sounds like you really hit me with the piece of the pie. And it sounds like um that thinking that there's only enough pie for me and therefore none for you is a fallacy, and that when we uplift others, we get more out of that experience, either through a more secure network or community, or even just you're benefiting from self-reflection, you
Yeah,
know.
yeah. Very,
Or
very well
even
put.
even along those lines of, I believe you said, no one can stop you from singing except yourself. No one
Hmm.
can stop you from collaborating except yourself. And that's in and of itself creating an opportunity, maybe even more pie, and that
Hmm.
sort of thing,
Right.
that others can benefit from rather than feel
Yeah.
like you're taking away. Yeah.
Pie is infinite.
It is. Yeah.
Exactly. Pie is infinite. Good call. Right. I mean, we get in such a scarcity mindset, and I'm not here to blow smoke up anybody's behind and say, oh, there are tons of paid opportunities out there, because we know the state of things. We know that really well paid opportunities are hard to come by, and many of us in this career will never be able to make a full-time living from this, especially not in today's world. Um, but that doesn't mean there aren't so many opportunities out there. I look at people who went to their undergrad with me and I see them doing all sorts of cool things in the world. One of them
Mhm.
founded an opera company. Many people moved into arts management. Some are professors. Some are having really thriving private voice studios. Some have sort of hybrid careers like myself, where I thought, what else do I love to do besides singing? And then I went into it. A master's degree for counseling because I enjoy working with people one on one. and I
Mhm.
enjoy psychology and it's really a passion of mine, but also because I wanted to have the type of job and lifestyle where I could get paid a good living wage, hourly wage, and that I would also have flexibility. So that, for example, last month when the local opera company had a called me up one morning and said, "We have to replace a singer quickly. Are you available?" Because
Yeah.
I am my own boss and can arrange my
Hmm.
schedule as I please, as long as I'm behaving ethically with my clients,
Hmm.
I could do an opera production that, and I jumped into the next day. And that's only
Yeah.
because I was able to not only maintain good connections within my community and have people know me and have me be a person that came to mind, but also that I have thought of what I'm doing in my life outside singing that helps support my singing. So I think that's another thing that I really urge younger folks to think about, or people who are beginning their careers. You will need a side job, like guaranteed. And even if you don't need it forever, you're going to need it for a good long while. And you
Mhm.
need to be thinking very strategically about what kind of side job you have, what other skills you have that allow you to have some control over your own time so you can take off for auditions and lessons and shows, etc., where you're also making enough money to survive on, right? And that's something that you could flexibly do on the side. So that's a whole other conversation, but I always really encourage clients, and especially in collegiate levels, to be thinking, what can I do outside of singing that is going to help me maintain a longer career in singing,
Yeah.
right? So I've been
For
able to
sure.
continue singing because I have been strategic about my career outside of singing.
Yeah.
Hmm.
That's great.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And broadening your community.
Right.
Yeah,
So,
broadening my community too. Yeah, totally.
yeah. Well, thank you so much for meeting with us.
Well, we so, so appreciate it, truly.